All right, so welcome to week three of facts and readings about economics. So this week we'll be talking about thinking along the margins or marginal analysis, which is a core concept that we need to understand in order for us to appreciate things in a similar way that economists would. This will be a fairly short video, largely because we'll be tackling things that we've already discussed before, but we'll be applying it now in certain cases and trying to understand it contextually, rather. All right, so there are four things that we'll go through. We'll talk about marginal thinking and what that means, and then we'll jump straight into an example and try to answer a couple of questions about how to handle basic problems that you would if you're a small business owner who owns a cinema. After that, we'll have a short discussion on the diamond water paradox, and this is a really interesting point to sort of drive home how marginal thinking works and why it's important. Um, and last, we'll just have a brief run through on things to do for this week. It's stuff that I'd like you guys to think about. All right? Right. So let's start with thinking at the margins, right? And try to sort of determine what that exactly means. Last week, we talked about rational choice theory, which presupposes that human beings are utility maximizers, or essentially individuals who do things based on their own preferences using whatever resources are currently available to them. Right? So it's about maximizing available opportunities at a given point in time. Um, but we need to sort of see that decision-making process not as a continuum, but rather as individual choices made over a period of time. And what that essentially means is that when you make a decision now and go one way, if that ends up in losses, let's say you decide to go to a concert and you hate that concert, you can't really go back and recover, the time you spent sitting in that seat, watching a concert for 2 hours. You can't really recover the cost of the ticket because it's something you already paid for and consumed. And you can't really, get back and do something else, right? Maybe stay at home and watch a movie instead, right? Because that the time that you spent, the decisions that you made are things that you can't really recover. So this is when we see marginal thinking come in, right? Wherein the cost paid isn't quite as important anymore because these are costs that you can't control. These are things that you can't recover anymore. And these are what we call sunk costs. So when we think about margins, right, it's normally associated with things that are at the edge, right? Um, and in terms of economics, what this means is that it's about looking at decisions made to make incremental changes to an existing activity, right? Um, it's a one really good example to contextualize what this means is say you're watching Netflix and you flick through your favorite TV series. If the TV series runs for like 6 seasons and you watch 3 seasons in a couple of days, the decision to watch the next episode shouldn't be determined by the 2 days that you've spent watching those 3 seasons, but rather whether or not the next episode will bring you sufficient joy, right? Enough to sit through another 30 minutes or so, or another hour or so of the series. So that's where we need to contextualize marginal thinking, right? It's not about the 3 seasons of things that you've watched, but rather it's about the next episode that you will watch and sort of looking at the happiness that it will give you in watching that one additional episode. So it's all about a cost benefit comparison to a certain extent between the marginal benefits, in the case of the example, the happiness that you get from watching a series you really enjoy, and the marginal costs, meaning staying up, watching an additional 30 minutes or spending an additional 30 minutes online, the cost of the internet and so on, right? So uh, it's all about understanding those comparisons. And it's not just a comparison of total costs and total benefits, but rather by the next additional unit of activity that you will partake in. Okay, so to further drill down this point, I'm going to provide you guys an example. And in this example, we'll sort of go through some of the decision-making processes involved in marginal thinking and try to sort of understand this rather simple problem of a small business owner and how they can, manage their business. Now, let's say you own a small cinema, and the cinema can seat rather about 200 people. Now, the cost to run that cinema per movie run is about 40,000 pesos. So this is your fixed cost. So essentially, regardless of whether or not there's somebody there seated in your cinema watching that movie, in order for you to run a 1.5 hour movie or like a 2 hour movie in your cinema, you need to pay 40,000 pesos. And what this can cover would be like licensing costs, electricity, utilities, like water, and that type of thing, rent maybe, and so on, right? And you sell your tickets at about 500 pesos per head or per seat, with snacks and soda included. Now, with the snacks and soda, you can choose not to give out these products or not to make these products if there isn't anyone seated in the cinema, right? So to a certain extent, these aren't fixed costs, right? They're costs that you incur if you get a new customer who actually comes in and buys a ticket. So in principle, this is what your marginal cost is in this example. So your cost per new customer or your marginal cost is about 100 pesos for the snack and the soda. And then you primarily sell your tickets online. Back in the day, there's a lot of moviegoers. You don't really need, to entice them to come and watch a movie. You usually sell out. But this time around, it's COVID, so there's not, sufficient people who wants to go out and watch a movie. And at the same time, it's a Tuesday, right? So, it's not the weekend. People aren't really out and about and doing, things in malls. So, the number of people who actually booked are about 100 people. All right. Now, the question there is that should you sell tickets on site right before the movie? Right? Should you continue selling tickets? I guess is the question. And then the second question is, should you discount the prices? What will be the potential effects of discounting those prices, and up to how much can you discount these prices? Okay, I'll give you guys a few minutes to pause the video, have a think about it. You don't really have to do complex maths to answer this question. In truth, you don't really have to do um, outside of basic addition and multiplication. So try to sort of think about it. Try looking at the marginal cost and the marginal benefit that you get for each additional customer that you get. All right. I'll take a quick pause so that you can uh, you can do that calculation in your head. All right. So have you got your answers ready? Okay. So let's go to. All right. So let's go to question one. Should you sell tickets on site right before the movie? And the answer is yes. Yeah, it's fairly simple. When you think about the cost and benefit comparisons between, how much it would cost you to run um, the whole thing relative to the benefits that you get, you can look at both the average total cost and average total benefits and the marginal cost and marginal benefit. Now, When you think of average and total cost, there's a lot of things to consider. You need to consider your fixed costs and your total marginal costs and so on. But in terms of marginal thinking, you can actually disregard average total cost and average total benefits. What's really essential is the second number below, right? So when you think about the marginal cost for each new customer, you're only paying actually an additional 100 pesos per new customer that you get, right? Because the 40,000 pesos to run the cinema is something that you'll pay for anyway, right? With the 100 customers you currently have, right? And you can't really discount that 40,000 pesos because you have less customers. So the true cost that you have to pay for each new additional customer is only about 100 pesos. And the marginal benefit that you get out of it, if you do in fact sell tickets on site, is about 500 pesos per new customer. So there's definitely more benefit for you if you decide to uh, sell tickets on site, if you can't sell them out online. All right, so let's go to question two. And with question two, you have three questions in truth. Should you discount prices? What will be the effect and up to how much? So when we think about discounting prices, well, yes, you should. In principle, this is how student and senior discounts rather work. Um, so when you think about your senior citizens and some students, they usually get discounts on certain days of the week where the idea really is to meet a lull in demand, right? So there are less people who want to watch a movie on Tuesdays. So in order to meet that demand, in order to meet supply rather, since I have 200 seats available that I can fill in, I can actually lower down my prices so that people who don't normally have as much economic power, meaning people who can't afford to watch a standard price ticket like students, can actually come in and watch, right? And it's the same thing for senior citizens. So with senior citizens, they generally have more time available to them to watch movies on the weekday, and at the same time, they don't necessarily have as much disposable income as working individuals. So providing them a discount price can actually drive up demand, right? And that sort of jumps into the second question: what will be the effect? And simply put, what this will mean is that it can encourage more people to actually come to the cinema and watch the movie. Right? So if you have 100 or so individuals who are currently booked, lowering the prices can actually help you entice more people so that you can get that additional 100 to come in and book a seat. Now, um, by up to how much, right? If you're going to provide discounts, by up to how much can you actually discount the ticket? And based on the current example, you can actually reduce it up to 80%, or essentially selling the ticket equivalent to the cost of providing snacks and soda, which is about 100 pesos per individual. So um, optimum allocation happens when the marginal cost of something is equivalent to the marginal benefit. Meaning to say, you can continue reducing the price of the ticket, you can continue increasing the discount um, up until you reach 100 pesos, right? If you can't fill the 200 seats um, at about 100 pesos, if you lower the price any more than that, you're actually spending more um, just to fill that extra seat, and it's not really worth it, right? All right. So going through that example, it's pretty clear how marginal thinking can be quite useful in terms of how you can make certain decisions on a day-to-day basis. But there are certain paradoxes to consider that can help you understand the value of thinking in the margins, right? So one particular example is what we call the diamond water paradox, wherein when you think about it, diamonds are grossly more expensive than water, but at the same time, it's much less essential. So, you know, you can survive an entire lifetime without owning a diamond, but you can't survive, a few months without drinking water, right? So the idea here is that, why is it that something that is far less essential, which you'd assume that, people would necessarily not necessarily want, is far more expensive than something that people generally need in order to survive, right? And to a certain extent, this is a perfect example of why we should consider marginal utility, uh, essentially the marginal benefit of diamonds versus water, wherein diamonds are perceived to be rare. So there's an assumption that there aren't a lot of diamonds in the world, so that when you get one diamond, your next unit of diamond is that much harder to get. So if it's a really limited, finite resource and it's difficult to access, it's assumed to be of higher value, right? Versus with water, wherein 75% of the world is composed of water. It's comparatively easier to access, especially in the Philippines where we have a ton of water. So therefore, the cost to water is comparatively lower, right? Because the cost in order to avail of the next unit of water, the next bottle of water or next glass of water, isn't quite as difficult to access or to secure, right? And because of that, the cost of that water is smaller as well. So here is where marginal thinking really comes in, and it's a really good example of how to appreciate the idea of marginal utility and marginal costs. All right. So that's the end of our lecture for this week. It's a fairly short lecture. Didn't take us more than a few minutes or so. But what I really want you guys to do is to take the time this week to read through the chapters and really understand, how this can be applied to your everyday lives. So take the time to reflect and think about it, and we'll talk about it in our next session. I want you guys to also watch this additional video that I added. It's about 12 minutes long on marginal costs and marginal benefits. It's a really good crash course, I guess, sort of hitting on the channel on how to appreciate marginal analysis and where that sort of fits in terms of economic theory. They also touch on things like elasticity. And sort of touches upon it in a really sort of layman way. So I think that's a really good resource to have an understanding on. And last, just really take the time to read the readings for this week. They're quite long, but they're both really really good books. So just read the first two chapters or so, and that can help you gain a better understanding of what we mean by marginal thinking. For Wednesday, we'll have the reporters come in and they'll start off the day with reporting, and then we'll have a breakout session in the afternoon. All right. So that is all, and have a good day, everyone. Bye.